Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Helen Taylor. I'm Director of Practice at Scott Brownrigg. I'm delighted to welcome you to this evening's event. It's the last in the RIBA's live series called Preparation for Practice. We've got a fantastic variety of people for you this evening. We won't have time for a Q&A session, but you are really welcome to ask questions, share information or make comments using the Q&A panel that you should see on the right of your screen, and we will endeavour to get back to you after the event. There's a lot more information about Future Architects and other support materials produced by the RIBA for you available on architecture.com, so do go and have a look there. So I'm going to start by introducing myself and Scott Brownrigg a little further. Scott Brownrigg, we're an award-winning collaborative international practice specialising in architecture, interior design and master planning. We're one of the oldest practices, and we can trace our roots back to 1910, and we currently have around 200 staff and a number of studios across the UK and internationally in Singapore, New York and Amsterdam. I'm an architect and fellow of the RIBA, and my job as Director of Practice means I'm responsible for all of our competence and compliance, and that includes looking after our graduates, our apprentices and learning and development for all our staff. I'm really proud that I won the AJ Collaboration of the Year in 2020 for a book on urban schools that was published by the RIBA, and I've also recently started mentoring a group of small minority-led practices, which is really rewarding. So I love working in large practice because of the opportunities and the connections it offers. I like working on big projects with big teams and having a huge range of expertise and experience that big practice pulls together. My career route, like a lot of us in the industry, hasn't been straightforward. Certainly when I graduated in the early 1990s, there was no work and I ended up doing whatever work I could get and then going straight into my part two. I've been made redundant, I've taken jobs I didn't want to do just to have an income, but I've very much learned that every experience can give you something you can use to make you a better designer and to move you forward on your next step and to find somewhere where you're happy, where you're valued, and importantly for me, where you're working with like-minded people. So I'm really excited to be talking to the future of the profession this evening. I've been through that final year myself. I know how hard you've all worked, and I also remember that next stage can feel really daunting and when you feel your life might have been mapped out for you so far. I'm sure you're full of ideas and ambitions for your next goal, and I hope you're thinking about how you're going to achieve them. But even if you don't have a clue what to do next or how you're going to get there, that is also okay. You will get there. I didn't have a plan. I knew I loved architecture. I wanted to make a difference, and having a profession that's open to everyone drives me now as much as it ever did. For example, I really wanted to be an architect and a mother, which I thought was a reasonable aspiration, but I hardly saw anyone fitting that description during my education, in journals or in practice when I graduated. I worked hard to change that, and I'm glad to say things are a bit better now, but you might still not see a role model for you. And if you can't see that role model for yourself, personally or professionally, then try and become that role model. So you're about to graduate into a world and an industry that is changing at a phenomenal rate. And some of that is driven by the pandemic and the climate emergency, some by digital technology, some by commercial viability, and some just because architects are innovators. I spent some of this afternoon with 160 practitioners at an Architects Declare event, talking about how architects can respond practically to the climate emergency and putting ideas into action. We really need diversity in the profession. We need your new fresh skills, fresh ideas, obviously in design, but also in sustainability, in digitisation, in health and safety, in materials, in working with existing buildings. There are opportunities out there. Businesses are recruiting, and we need people who are willing to join teams and to solve problems to make our built environment better. It's not always glamorous, but all parts of the job of architecture and the knowledge and skills that you have are really important. We all have a personal responsibility, I believe, as professionals, but we also have power as individuals to make a difference. experience. And right now, architects are designing solutions for homelessness, schools that float, flat pack sustainable homes, buildings on the moon. So what are you going to do? I want to say that one of my favourite TED Talk business gurus, I'm a big fan of TED Talks, Simon Sinek, says people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So think about that. Why are you doing what you do? There's a few tips for success I'll give you before I pass on to my esteemed colleagues. And they're quite useful parenting tips as well, in case that's helpful. So number one is be yourself. So what's in your heart, remind yourself of that and keep pursuing it, and that will really help you through difficult times. Be nice, it's a small world. Build a network for yourself. Those junior engineers and project managers that you work with now are going to be the industry leaders in the future. Try new things. I regret the things I didn't do, not the things I did do. So every experience will teach you something, even if it isn't designing buildings. Treat others how you would like to be treated. You may be surprised, but being a good leader means wanting other people to succeed. And if you ever become an employer, employ people who are better than you and let them play to their strengths. And good leaders always show vulnerability, empathy and compassion. And sorry about this one, but do your homework. Your learning journey is not over. You will never stop needing new skills. And your knowledge and research can build trust and create opportunities. Be a sponge, take everything in, and don't be afraid to ask questions. If you're an apprentice, get a mentor. You'll get a mentor. If you're not an apprentice, find a mentor. Find someone who you respect and admire and ask their opinion. And don't be afraid to ask for help to achieve your dreams. And finally, I'd say have fun. Celebrate your achievement, enjoy your career, believe in the power of passion, commitment and collaboration to make change. And as my favourite African proverb says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I hope that's given you some things to think about. We've got fantastic content to get the evening started, and I'm going to hand over now to Faye and Aled from Stride Treglowan, who are also going to be speaking with their students, Sophie and Mustafa. So over to you, so Aled and Faye. Thank you.
Fantastic, thanks Helen. I think there were some really inspiring words there. So we're going to now move on to the RIBA Future Architects Mentoring Scheme, which we're going to talk to you about today, which we're really excited to bring this to you. So we'd like to give you a bit of a flavour if you might have already done mentoring scheme, or you might be thinking of doing it, might be nearing the end of your part one. So we want to give you a flavour, or if you haven't done it, maybe you missed out on it because you went straight from part one to part two. We just want to briefly give you a good overview about the mentoring scheme and what it brings to the table and how it can help you. So my name is Faye Morrison, shown on the left. I'm an architect and I did parts 1, 2 and 3 at UWE.
Hi, my name is Aled Jones. I'm an architect from Stride Treglowan in Cardiff office as well. I did my parts 1 and 3 at UWE and my part 2 at the Centre for Alternative Technology. And joining us as well, we have Sophie Cartwright. Sophie is currently a student in her part 2 at the University of the West of England. And Sophie was fortunate enough, I think is the word to say, to join us for mentoring last year in our Cardiff office. We're also going to hear from Mustafa, who's currently studying his part 2 in Bournemouth University, and he's going to share with us some thoughts on the mentoring process and how he thinks it might help him in the future in his career.
Great, so we thought we'd give you a bit of an overview of Stride Treglowan and who we actually are, if you don't already know about us. So we have 9 offices spread all over the country, and myself and Aled are based in the Cardiff studio. We are an employee-owned practice since 2015. We have over 300 people working with us. And most recently, thing to note is we're a certified B Corporation, and we're the first AJ Top 100 practice to get certified. So that's a great achievement for the company and shows our social skills and social value for the environment and also our staff moving forward.
So Stride Treglowan is a multidisciplinary practice offering additional services as well as just architecture. We wanted our students who came to undertake mentoring with us to understand how larger practices in the built environment operate, and how we integrate different disciplines on different projects, how we work together on schemes, because we're aware that in the university world you tend to work very insular, whereas the actual construction is a much more collaborative process, and students sometimes find that a bit alien from their Part 1 degrees. So these are the services that Stride Traglawn offer, and you can see there's quite a variety there across different disciplines. We also operate in around 14 major core sectors. We're able to show the students how each studio is split down into different teams, different specialities, and how you can sort of focus your time with the practice into a particular area if that's of interest to you. But we're also in a world which is always changing, so the sectors that we're currently operating in change quite rapidly. For example, healthcare has increased quite considerably with the pandemic, and the challenges that are associated with providing facilities in that kind of environment.
So this is a breakdown of our sectors to how big they are within our company, within Stride Traglawn. And myself and Aled, we work in schools, technology innovation, further education and higher education is our specialties.
So what is student mentoring? Well, student mentoring was set up by the RIBA to ease the transition between university and practice. To give you an idea of the scale, there's currently around 1,000 mentees being mentored by over 500 mentors throughout the UK. And this is a constantly growing number. So we're looking at quite a large process, and something which is continually to expand year on year. The idea of the process really is to link students with architects to experience practice life in an environment, so that the students can pose questions of architects, and conversations can be had to look into practice life and sort of prepare students a bit more for what they're going to experience once they leave the university world and move into architectural practice. And in terms of what you'll actually look at when you're in the mentoring process, there's obviously the opportunity for building connections, and like we talked about there, sort of asking questions of architects, things that maybe don't resonate particularly well in university, but you can see, well, how would that work in the real world? And the insight into the professionalism of an architect and how an architect's office is run, how projects are run. Another part of the offering was that we looked at student CVs and the experience and how they develop once they leave their Part 1. There's obviously, this for a lot of people is finding their first job post degree can be quite an undertaking, and also looking for jobs in architecture can be quite different to a lot of others. So actually explaining how that process works. And finally, for the students, it's a really good opportunity for them to ask questions of architects and practice, which they might not be able to get from the university experience itself. And really, the way we kind of word it with our students is nothing is out of bounds. If there's an area of practice that they really are interested in, we encourage them to expand on that and ask us more.
Yeah, great. So the usual format is you have an introductory session, meet your mentor, and then there was 3 2-hour core sessions that you fit into to do the mentoring. Myself and Ali picked this up, and we did it slightly differently. After we did the meet the mentor icebreaking session, we really got a flavour of what the students wanted to get out of it, and from this we really wanted to work it in to make sure we covered everything. So this resulted in a combined 2 sessions into a day workshop, which we offered them into our practice to cover that. And you'll see further on in the presentation that agenda and what items we covered. And then we followed that up again with the session, and this then went into Zoom when we hit COVID. So where does the mentoring fit in? I'm sure you're all pretty familiar with the process of qualification and becoming an architect. You've got the 3 parts and the 2 years out typically in between. So the student mentoring really fits in at the end of Part 1, just before your Part 1 year out. And we think it's a great place to put it in, to give you that little bit of flavour of practice. So when you are looking at studios, you do have some background knowledge, and you've already asked some questions of some architects and some professionals before you go into it. So why did us 2 get involved? So a main one was mentoring didn't exist when we did our Part 1s back around 10 years ago. So we really wanted an opportunity to give back, because we, after chatting, really thought that that would have been a great opportunity for us to dip our toe into practice and a great time to do it, but it just wasn't available. So it's so good that this sort of scheme is available now, and because it gives the students first-hand experience in practice, which a lot of students, if you're focused into university, you don't get that exposure to practice. So this mentoring really gives a good segue into that.
So how did we approach our student mentoring then? So the RIBA recommends some topics which we needed to cover in the mentoring sessions. And we looked through that itinerary list and could see where it was trying to expand the students' knowledge. But part of the process for us was that Faye and I actually sat down and talked about our experience and what it was like for us when we left our part one and started looking for jobs in the real world. And some of the things that maybe we know now that we didn't know at the time, and what would have been more useful if someone had told us before we actually started in practice. So that led to quite a change, I suppose, or an addition to the RIBA scheme, which we just added to sort of correct it a little bit potentially to show other things. But the other thing was that the students themselves actually put forward quite a lot of input into what they'd like to cover and what they'd like to learn about in their time with us in practice, so they could actually start to see things that how practices were run, how projects are run, and how that operates. So the first part of the process really is the Meet Your Mentor session, where on it was held at UWE and in the architecture studios, and the architects and the students are put together, and it's the first opportunity as a sort of icebreaker to actually get to know each other, get to find out where you are in your careers, have a bit of a general chat really, but also start to put some notes to paper and decide, well, what is it we want to cover in these next coming weeks, and what do students want to get out of it, what do the architects think the students need to see about how the world of practice works.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, we did a workshop day along with Sophie, which you'll speak to later and get feedback from her. And on the right hand side, you can see a mentoring agenda. It was a full day, but we were very keen to hit every single item that the students were trying to get out of it and trying to cover and get that experience. So it was a fun packed day, and we'll take you through it now. So yeah, we started with bringing in a structural engineer. We had Dan from RBW come in because the students were particularly keen in how we liaise and work with other disciplines such as structure. They did also have a little session on how they can improve their own thesis projects of how the structure works. So it was a good opportunity to ask a real life structure engineer items like that. And I think that exposure is just something that is limited in university. So just having half an hour session, a Q&A with the structural engineer was really good and really fruitful for them.
Great, thanks, Faye. So we thought it was really important as well that the students were actually immersed into the practice environment. Part of being an architect is obviously about being based in a studio, though for the last year that's been virtual for a lot of people. And we actually thought it was really important that we brought the students into our Cardiff studio so they could see how we operate, how we work, how it's laid out, how meetings are held and everything else. And we actually invite you to virtually join us in Cardiff today if you'd like to. On the right hand side there's some QR codes. If you scan those you can join us in our Cardiff studio virtually through VR. Those QR codes will actually stay on for the next slide, so don't all rush to get your phone straight away. But so during the first session, we also talked to the students about some of the technologies that they use during their part one studies at the moment. So things like virtual reality, 3D printing is all really prominent in schools of architecture. The students are really keen on it. And what we thought was really interesting was if they actually found out how we use that in practice life and how it influences projects and how it's design teams in the actual process of getting buildings built.
Great, and then we had an inspiration hour. So we had one of our senior associate architects come in to give a concept to reality session. So because the students are really keen on seeing how we go from the sketch to how it actually gets built and implemented on site. So so we had Phil talking about our award-winning Skull Bay Bagland School of how the concept went to reality and how the building got built. So that was a really fruitful session over lunch, just giving some inspiration to our students. So yeah, so we also covered items such as procurement, appointment, PI, building contracts, because we really wanted to give a real world perspective of what actually the job entails as well, because these items, especially in part one, don't always get covered, and we just wanted the students to at least be aware that they exist. So when they crop up, maybe when they're in the part one placement or definitely in part two, they're at least aware that something exists. So we thought that was really fruitful to go through as well. And finally on the day, we had student presentations, so we gave them an opportunity to give us a mini crit on their projects if they wanted feedback from us too. We also did like some interview prep and looked at the CV to give them a few pointers of how they can improve it, even if it's just formatting and clarity. So that was a really fruitful session for the students of how they can move forward post mentoring.
So our final session, obviously, there you can see we held on Zoom. Unfortunately, the pandemic had started to take hold by this point, and most of us were now working from home. And the site visit that we were planning on taking with the students on was unfortunately not available. So in terms of actually giving the students a bit of on-site experience, we were fortunate that the Maths and Computer Science project, which is one of my schemes in Cardiff at the moment, is currently on site. And the students were able to have a good look around that virtually through the webcams and the BIM models and everything else. And we could really interrogate that project in terms of actually what happens on a construction scheme once it goes through the design stages and we actually get on site and start to get things built. So that was a really good session for the students to see the actual process of on-site construction, albeit virtually this year. And hopefully in the future, I think that's a really important part of any student mentoring, really, is actually getting your site boots on, getting your hard hat on, and having a good look around the construction site and seeing the drawings come into reality. So what did we learn and take away from the student mentoring process? Well, it's super important to us that we appreciate where the gaps are between university and practice life, and just try and ease that transition a little bit for the students, so that when they leave their part one and start to look for jobs and looking to go into practice life, that transition is not seeming a mile away from what they've just undertaken in their part one. And actually, what the mentoring process does is start to show them how that's going to work out. But also, there was a real sort of realization for myself and Faye that we've gone through the process, and in hindsight, there's quite a lot we've learned from this, and then sharing that with students, like Faye's mentioned at the very beginning. But what we've actually learned from it is we can give back a little bit, really, which is really fulfilling. The university link is particularly important to all practices, and that's no exception to Stride Glam. We think it's really important that the actual links between practice and university are really strongly maintained, as we take on a lot of students who are coming out of different parts. So it's really great for us to be involved in that. And personally for us, we were able to sort of continue our mentoring and our teaching skills, and actually stay linked with the current trends in university. And it's really sort of inspiring for us as well to see the students' work and see what they're involved in.
Yeah, sure. Like we said, the students were so ambitious, and we got so much out of it from what they were wanting to give and how much we could give as well, which was really great. So this leads us straight into our student perspective, and we got Sophie and Mustafa, who we introduced earlier. So we're going to start with Sophie. So Sophie, would you like to give us your overview of the mentoring and your perspective?
So I got involved really because, like you said earlier, I really wanted to understand how architecture worked out of uni in like real world, and I wanted to see how the different disciplines come together, which you guys were great for showing us, especially as you said, you brought in the structural engineer. That was great for us because in university you don't get to do that as much, work with different disciplines. And then what I got out of it is, like you saw, we got to actually make up our own kind of timetable for the day, which was great. And we had like a whole hour on procurement, which is maybe not what people expected, but it's what we found that we needed to learn. and it's what you guys kind of do every day. So it was, I think you were for mentoring, that was kind of the best people to learn from, the people who are doing it every day. But also kind of how the process of the work. So I think the concept to reality section that really helped us, like, show us kind of where you bring in the models and where you bring in the virtual reality. But also it was really nice to see that you guys still do the diagramming and aspects like that in university you don't know if this actually happens in real life, but it does, and it's actually important to kind of keep that going. And in terms of like finding a benefit from mentoring, from my part 1 to part 2, I didn't actually do a year out, but Faye and Allied were great because I went straight to my part 2 and I was really unsure of where to do it, so I didn't know whether to go to UE or to CAT. Fortunately, Allied had gone to CAT and Faye had gone to UE, so both were available to give me loads of guidance, kind of talk about their different aspects of how their part 2 went. And I think in university you don't get this because your tutors are so busy. There's around probably 200 students just for architecture they have to listen to, so they can't give you that time. And Faye and Allied were always answering emails straight away, and it was just really nice to have like a contact outside of university. I think that's what I found massive benefit, which at first was quite intimidating, but you kind of realise that they're humans too, even though they've done the whole architecture process. They've kind of been where we are, and I think what we found really refreshing was that both Allied and Faye are very young, so it wasn't long ago that they did the process, so not much has changed since they've been there in terms of step by step. So they knew a lot of the tutors that I had in UE, and they were familiar with the process that we'd been through, and I think they could relate to what we'd been through, which made us relate to them even easier. But I definitely recommend it. It helps you understand how office work, like life works, and it's also a contact, which I think in any industry, no matter if you're an architect or a structural engineer or an accountant, contacts are kind of amazing to have, especially coming out of an undergrad, especially in a pandemic when nowadays meetings aren't face to face, it's all virtual. So that was really helpful. And also I was going to say the fact about the pandemic, like Faye and Allied said earlier, our second meeting was done over Zoom, and I think we kind of expected as students that because the pandemic hit that our session would be cancelled because their life was just more stressful than ours, if anything. But they actually put the time together to set up a Zoom meeting and still continue that meeting through for us, which we all really, really appreciated, because we knew that for them, going from moving everything to home was probably much more stressful than doing a degree from home. So we really appreciated that. But also the fact we got to choose our own topics for the day. And as you can see in the photos there, we even got to do our own crit and kind of get involved with the models and actually see kind of how they present their process work to customers. So it was really interesting to do, because in university you don't see anything like that. It's all kind of comparing students' work to one another. So it's refreshing to see that what we do in uni isn't actually far from the truth at all in real life. It's quite nice.
Great, Sophie. That's a great overview and great feedback, and I think that really helped the students if they're thinking about doing it to do it. So that's great. So I think we should move on to Mustafa, who's got a different perspective because he hasn't actually done mentoring yet. So Mustafa, why do you want to get involved?
I want to get involved because as you guys said before, like, you know, when I came out of my part 1, there was no mentoring scheme. And like Helen was saying, you know, I came out, I loved architecture, I had a passion for it. I didn't want to do anything else. And I said, okay. So I just went out and tried to find like any jobs, you know, that was out there. And what was missing was the guidance. I didn't know how to start, who to approach. People, like when I applied to practices, they didn't want me because I didn't have the necessary experience, sort of like, you know, to be in that practice and actually, you know, get my work as a feasible sort of element. And really understanding the business of architecture, of how is it run, which I had to sort of like, just jump in the cold water and then sort of like try to figure it out day by day, making loads of mistakes. And yeah.
Great.
So on the next slide.
So yeah, do you feel like you've missed out on anything by not being part of a mentoring scheme as yet?
Oh yeah, a lot. I mean, like now hearing Sophie talk about how the mentoring scheme was, I felt like I missed out a big chunk of kind of getting prepared for the industry, such as like how to approach a new project with confidence. Every project that I went to, I just said yes, and then it's like okay, I said yeah, I had no idea how to do it, just go home and try to figure it out. But having someone there with the confidence actually approaching the project, that was sort of like what I could have get out of it, and learning how to get clients and like how to approach the clients and work with the clients, which I all had to do sort of like figure out myself. But which in the mentoring scheme, like you sort of like set down, broke down every part and sort of like go through it one by one, which I sort of like looking back in it now would have been a massive help. And as as well as Sophie was saying, coming out, having those contacts, someone to actually go and ask questions to, was really like what I was missing a lot. And obviously like on site, so like being on site, because obviously everyone that I got the jobs from sort of like expected me to know and be on site and know everything that is about the project. So kind of like going on the building sites and like talking to the builders and having my plans appropriate to the builders was a big challenge first in the beginning of years. But I can imagine being in a mentoring scheme, most of these problems would have been solved. Next slide, please. Sorry.
Great. So I think you've probably covered this, but what would you hope to get out of it if you're involved? So
yeah, 100%. Like obviously coming out, being again like confident in the industry and just coming out and like facing clients and being like okay, like working with other people collaboratively, working more efficiently. I remember like doing loads of work that sort of like was complete waste of time, and I could have done just done that and that and that. But sort of like being more efficient now kind of like is really important, because time is money, and everyone sort of all the clients kind of want to save the money. And obviously being employable with experience now, coming out sort of like from the mentoring scheme, what I got out of it is like, you already had like a first-hand experience in working on real life projects and being in a collaborative sort of environment, being in the office environment, which I missed out, I hope to be in, and understanding and I think that we covered that one.
So yeah, I think you've probably already touched on this as well, about how it would help you with part 1 and beyond. But like you said, it's all about the experience and the understanding prior to going to that.
Absolutely, and the resources to get, I remember printing was a big deal. I had to go printing always, like print shop, get the A1s done and everything. But there's no real resources there. Like now I've sort of like turned my room into a little office. But before, yeah, the resources was a big deal.
Right.
And the next one,
your last thoughts.
Yeah, for anyone that's trying to get out there, just like be driven. It's if you love architecture, just wake up every day with the same confidence, same motivation. And mistakes are awesome. Like don't feel bad if you do a mistake. I know lots of students who do mistakes and just feel like, oh no, question the whole life choices and aren't even sure if architects are for them. That's fine. Make mistakes. Mistake is the only way to learn. Another one, it's fine to get knocked down, but don't get knocked down. Okay, you always get down, but like keep on moving and have fun. Like you get to design a space and a building, so enjoy being in the process.
Fantastic. Well, thanks very much for your perspective, and of course to Sophie. So so I'll pass you to Ali to finish up.
Well, great, thanks Sophie and Mustafa for your thoughts there on the mentoring process. Well, me and Faye, thank you, and we hope that you enjoyed this presentation. It's given you a flavour of the mentoring process and what we've undertaken and what the students have got out of it. We'll now hand you back to Helen, who's going to introduce the next topic.
Fantastic, thank you all.
Brilliant. That was excellent. Thank you, everybody. I'm wishing I'd had the RIBA mentoring scheme when I graduated a very long time ago as well. It sounds really fantastic, and I'd really encourage all of you out there to get involved and take up that opportunity that the RIBA's got on offer. So we're going to move on now to a short film, and as some people mentioned in the previous section, site visits did become difficult over the last year, but site construction work has continued. So let's play you a short film about a project in Bath.
So one of the things I think was interesting at the outset on this project was the opportunity to work with quite a significant, interesting historic building in Bath and design an extension that is clearly of the 21st century, quite contemporary, and the merging of those two components in one hopes a successful way.
I think what appealed to me most at the outset of this project was the opportunity to work closely with a local community and to help improve what is an important community hub in Widcombe. So I think what makes this project distinct for me was the fact that the existing building is actually a collection of buildings of various ages, ranging from sort of 40 to 200 years old. And the challenge of installing a contemporary extension sort of into that jigsaw puzzle is just a unique condition and environment to work in.
I think one of the things that is unique about this project is the client organisation. In a very positive way, we picked up a project a few years ago that had been thought about by the church and that community for a good number of years. And the important part of picking it up was not to kind of interfere with that dynamic, but support the way that the design had developed and the way that people wanted the scheme to evolve in a way that was collaborative and valuable. So one of the things that I think is important to us about this project is we live with it. It is so close to where we work as a practice. It's in Bath. It makes it that much more important to us as a practice. It is a tricky environment to work in this city in conservation terms. And so to be successful with the listed building consent and the planning approval is something we're delighted about, and the opportunity to deliver what I think is will be a really valuable scheme to the church is our greatest focus.
So for me, I think one of the really exciting elements of the brief was the church's aspiration to move the spaces where the activity happened to the front of the building, so that you get this really dynamic and active frontage to the building. And I think that will benefit the streetscape as a whole, as well as the church in terms of its organisation. So most of the new spaces have been designed with flexibility in mind, so that hopefully they can accommodate a broad variety of all of the groups that you cater for here at the church.
So I think one of the things I've found really interesting about working in the community of the Baptist Church is that we start a project like this dealing effectively with the church as a whole, so 200 or more people, and actually as time goes on, learning that actually that community is a large group of interested individuals, and the skills that each bring to the project are quite individual. And whilst we sit here as architects with our particular input, those of others is equally, if not more important. And the success of this project will be our ability to deliver something that belongs to Widcombe Baptist Church and is not actually necessarily of our making.
So one of the things I've learned from working with Widcombe Baptist Church is that This church is a core community in Widcombe, with outreach spanning far and wide across multiple communities, and so hopefully this project helps enable the safeguard of the longevity of that community. It's also just been great meeting a whole new bunch of people.
I'm now going to hand over to my colleagues from Scott Brownrigg, Dagmar Binstead, who's an associate architect and one of our great mentors, and Joanna Koning, who's one of our level 7 apprentices, and they're going to tell you a bit more about life in practice and the apprenticeship scheme. Over to you, Dagmar and Joanna.
Hi everybody, it's really exciting for us to be part of this event. So as Helen mentioned, I'm one of the mentors. I'm an apprenticeship mentor, which is a little bit different from the mentoring you just heard about. So I'll just give you a very short overview of the apprenticeship scheme. I'll post some links in the chat later on, then you can have a look at it, because it is a little bit more complex if you haven't had a look at it yet. So we currently offer level 7 apprenticeships within Scott Brownrigg, which we are delivering together with Oxford Brookes. And Joanna is one of our 2 apprentices we currently have in our London office. Joanna is in year 2 of her part 2, which is the level 7 apprenticeship. And I'll be asking her a few questions, and hopefully we'll have a nice conversation going. But before we launch into that, I just want to give you a very quick overview of what the course is like with Oxford Brookes. So they offer a blended learning platform, which was really quite handy when the pandemic hit, because some of the content was already delivered online, because they have realized that most of the students will be London based or indeed all over the country. So Oxford Brookes have offered something where a lot of the learning content is delivered on their in-house platform, and the apprentices, they work in the office and learn a lot in the office. So we deliver 80% of the learning in the office, and then about 20% is being delivered by Oxford Brookes, and they do this in intensives, which is what's called a block release in apprenticeship speak. So that means you will get a whole week or a few days off in a block that you spent with your university. Those of you who have looked around might have noticed there are other schemes. They do something called a day release, where you typically spend 1 day a week or so in the university and the rest in the office. So that's what an apprenticeship is. You basically learn in the office and at university, and it's all linked together. So without further ado, I'll just ask Joanna a few questions, and hopefully we can give you a bit of a flavour of what life of an apprentice and life in the office is like. So Joanna, do you just want to kick us off by telling us how you actually decided on becoming an apprentice and what that was like?
Hiya. So I didn't intend to come onto the apprenticeship initially. So I graduated about almost 2 years ago from my part 1, and I was looking for a part 1 position and trying to figure out how I was going to sort of continue my architectural journey, if you will, and sort of but in a way that I could realistically do it. So I knew that if I were to do it through the sort of traditional route, it would take me a lot longer to come up with the funds and come up with the applications to different universities and finding the employment I wanted. So I was lucky enough to come across Scott Brownrigg and apply to the part 1 position. But they informed me of the apprenticeship that was available, and because I'd done an internship before, I had some experience within the with working on Revit and different softwares that I sort of fit the scheme of understanding the experience of working and studying. So I was lucky enough to come and learn from Scott Brownrigg and immerse myself in the apprenticeship and study.
Thanks, Joanna. And I mean, if you cast yourself back to when you finally started your apprenticeship, can you just give us a little flavour? What was your first day actually like?
So my induction actually came before I started working at Scott Brownrigg, and it was great because I got to meet everyone, all the other students who were currently had already been working, and it was great to meet people from a whole range of different companies from across the country. So we've got people in Plymouth, we've got people up north, we've got people in Bristol, and then a bunch of us in London. So it was really good to meet them beforehand and sort of understand that I was still getting the kind of uni experience of a whole bunch of people that I could learn from and study with and socialise with. Got some really good friends, but then also 2 weeks later start this new job and sort of immerse myself in a new team of colleagues and sort of get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, so I still remember it as well. It was quite exciting to meet you, and as a mentor I'm always super happy to see our new apprentices and watch you embed yourself in the office and work in your team. So can you tell us a little bit more about what it's like to learn at work and at uni at the same time, because this is obviously quite different from being in a full-time university or even a part-time course, and maybe just tell people a little bit how you're exposed to the RIB work stages and what kind of people you deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. Well, when I first started working, I was put into the advanced technology team, which basically works initially in data centers a lot of the time. And as someone who just started working, I didn't really even know what a data center was or what a UPS room meant or anything. So I think my initial hurdle was understanding how Revit worked and how to sort of build myself as sort of a worker and as an architectural assistant in sort of a new team. And I gained a lot of experience in different stages of works, mainly in stage 2. And it was really good to sort of have a wider understanding of how building works in sort of realistic scheme and work with external people. So I got to work with different engineers who majorly informed sort of data-driven design. I also, this poured into my uni work. So with our uni work, we had to come with sort of an interest of research. And I was really interested in the role of the architect from my previous studies as an undergrad, and sort of how the role of the architect can work with different communities and how we can have the best informed design. And so I've been looking at inclusivity and inclusivity both within the profession and the design with communities. So this sort of poured into each other, I think, in the way that I sort of put together my design schemes and the way that I researched my topic, which was really helpful in sort of getting a more in-depth level of study, I think.
Yeah, that's really great. I think we're sort of nearly out of time, but I think if you just want to show us just a couple of pictures of the work you've actually done so far.
So here you can see, so as I just said, sort of understanding my overall topic in inclusivity has really helped me at Scott Brownrigg and understand the way we initially work as architects. So my initial concept within my study has really looked into this as my concept, and then I've been given a site with my uni work of King's Cross, and in developing a design with my research informing that design. So I get to look at different building typologies, which I initially looked at in year 1, where I looked at redesigning a skyscraper to be able to build for the urban world, so to design for people's needs as well as the demand that we have. And this was really interesting during COVID when I was designing living and working spaces, but how they're sort of combined into different research in those researchers of the time. And then we get to test this sort of idea in different themes and different intensives and different blocks of study when we all meet up as a uni. And my latest one has been in data-driven design. So how I can inform sort of a skyscraper by looking at user-driven data in different frameworks and methodologies, which has informed my sort of methodology of research, which is leading on to my dissertation. So everything kind of informs each other, as well as getting sort of a background to how I can work, how this can bring stuff back to Scott Brownrigg on how we work as architects as well as kind of teach myself on how I'd like to establish myself as an architect, especially when I qualify eventually. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Joanna. I mean, as you can see, this is a very integrative way of working and learning. So I hope we could give you a really good flavor of what an apprenticeship might be like. We'll be posting some links later on, and I think we'll hand back to Helen. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dagmar. We're going to go straight into a video about a day in the studio.
It's been 1 year since we all went indoors. 1 year of what will the future bring? How long is that queue? And sorry, Janet, you're muted. Only a few months earlier, I had been visiting my family home in Harare, Zimbabwe. During that time, I knew I wanted to be an architect. I was inspired by both the beauty of its breeze block skyscrapers and how the rural homesteads lived peacefully with the environment. It was a memory still in my head as we all went into lockdown number 1. Suddenly, everything became unpredictable. How will this affect my career? Who is still hiring? What does my future hold? Well, let's fast forward a year. I'm Tanya, and I'm from South Wales. I'm in my 3rd year studying BSc Architecture at the University of Bath, where they integrate the Part 1 placement with our degree. I'm now working as an architectural assistant at Noma Architects in Bristol, who specialise in care homes and providing affordable community housing. For me, architecture is designing for emotion and learning how to accommodate people. It can be wildly artistic, but also scientific and practical. I knew I wanted to do this in my career, but how? When it was time to start applying, I was nervous. Will firms like my portfolio? What interview questions will I be asked? Will I even get an interview? Here are my key tips from my experience. Number 1, get advice from your university's careers team. At Bath, we have one specifically for architecture. Their help with mock interviews, portfolio reviews, and how to search for a job really helps me know where to start. 2, organise your time. Put time aside where you can focus on sending out applications. This will make it more possible for you to start working at the earliest availability. Know your priorities and what timing is best for you. I decided when I was able to start working and started applying 3 months before that. Another tip, have a list of job vacancy websites that you can check regularly. I used Dezeen Jobs, Arconnect, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, and I found my current job at Noma on my university department's job vacancy database. Also, ask others if they know any opportunities. Word of mouth can go a long way. When you get invited to the interview, be confident in your strengths, but also remember you have a lot left to learn. Practice answering questions with friends and family, and always provide examples when you explain why you're fit for the job. Saying it out loud will boost your self-belief and you'll know what makes you a unique applicant. Next tip, I would say keep an open mind. While ensuring the position qualifies for RIBA's placement requirements, you should also apply outside of your favourite architecture firms. You never know what professional discipline you might end up enjoying. RIBA goes into further detail on their page, Contingency Planning for Part 1 students. My last tip for applying would be keep going and take care. There's no overall formula to getting a placement. Some students get early replies and some start working much later on. In the meantime, prioritise your well-being as you search. You never know when you'll be accepted until the day it happens. I've now been working at Noma Architects for 2 months, and from the day I first read their website, I've admired their focus on caring for communities. As an employee, I spent my first 3 weeks training before working from home like my other colleagues. Day to day, I enjoy working in a team and getting to know everyone via online calls and messaging. As an assistant, I've been able to learn on the job and play a key role in the firm's design work. I'm able to be creative in the early stages of RIBA's plan of work while designing sketch schemes and 3D models. I've also learnt more about the business management, from writing company brochures and attending meetings with external consultants. So far for me, the best part has been visiting sites during construction, where I can talk to clients and see firsthand how drawings transform into real buildings. Working from home means I've been able to work in a comfortable environment while tending to my professional responsibilities. The travel home from work is from the living room to my bed, so this means I have more time in the evenings to relax and talk to my friends. It does mean your work is now at home with you, and so I like to rest during lunch break in a different room away from my desk, similar to going to eat in the staff room. During break, I like to usually read, draw, or watch TV. If it's sunny, a little exercise can be refreshing before the afternoon. Also, tea. Lots of tea. What's made the biggest difference has been how welcoming everyone has been. The best way to enjoy your time working is to remember it's all a learning process and make the most of being surrounded by experts in your field. Overall, my best tips would be: keep a personal calendar and notebook to schedule meetings and deadlines. Establish a routine so you can split your day between work and play. Always know to ask for help when there is something you don't know how to do. You're new, and so listening to your employers and trying is what counts. So, goodbye and good luck.
Fantastic advice there from Tanya. That was excellent little video. We're just going to round up now with a few quick slides about working from our international chapters. So just an example from Scott Brownrigg, we're an international firm, and I think, as Tanya showed, most of our staff have been working remotely. We've had members of staff, including students, starting work with us since January who've never been into the studio yet. So you can make it work, and location is not necessarily a barrier anymore to your ambition. So do remember that. Next slide, please. So if you are thinking about venturing overseas, it is still possible. Obviously, we are still in a difficult situation at the moment with the pandemic, but opportunities do exist. Do your research, think about the viability in terms of the COVID restrictions. Don't be afraid to reach out to any contacts you've got overseas. Peers, friends, friends of friends, contacts will always help, and networking and knowledge is going to be key. And be prepared. So think about how your CV will present all of your knowledge and skills, particularly perhaps in a country that isn't familiar with the course that you've been following in the UK or anywhere in the world. So make sure you make your skills and knowledge really clear. Next slide, please. Think about visas. There is advice available online. Department of International Affairs and places like that can advise on that. Obviously, check on travel arrangements and your ability to actually get there, and whether remote working would be possible from your current location. And the quarantine rules are changing all the time, so do keep an eye on that and make sure that you can work around that or work with the constraints that are in place. Next slide. Get your network sorted when you arrive, not only in the office, so establish relationships, find out who's who, what their role is, who can help you. You can have cultural differences to deal with, so make sure you understand what's expected of you in terms of those relationships, but make sure you expand those relationships beyond the office. And certainly we found in our international offices that those networks within architecture and across the industry are really, really valuable and important to getting opportunities and to finding out what's going on in the area. And as Tanya said so well in her film, know when to stop, give yourself breaks, think about how your lifestyle is going to be out there, how you can build networks through your hobbies and in your interests as well. Next slide, please. The work from home culture could be different in different countries. We've certainly seen that in our international studios. There are different rules that apply, different expectations. So, the work in the UK may not be the same as other countries, but I'm sure that any studio that you or office that you work with would give you some really good advice on that. And think about how you might deal with isolation if you're in a new place and having to work from home. Even if you start by going into the office, there may be future situations where you're in lockdown again. So make sure you're in a situation where you can work comfortably from home if that is required of you in the future. Next slide. I think the Future Architects website on architecture.com, there's lots of good information there. There's obviously the really good career sites as well. Again, Tanya referenced a lot of those that we're familiar with, so get out there and look for some opportunities. I think unfortunately that's all we have time for. That hour has gone really fast. I really hope that all of you have taken something away from all the conversations. I certainly have. It's been some really fascinating content and fascinating feedback. Keep an eye on those Future Architects pages on architecture.com for more guidance and information. Thank you so much to all the contributors this evening and all the guest speakers for all the time, taking part and volunteering. Have a good evening, everybody, and good luck with your next steps. Bye.